The agenda this week assessed how well cities are making space for seniors, debated an Ontario town's decision to partner with Uber, and probed public distrust of expertise. The agenda's Week in Review begins, remembering the Battle of Vimy Ridge. Margaret, for some reason, Vimy it's bigger than Juneau right now. It's bigger than Korea. It's bigger than Afghanistan. It has almost superseded all other Canadian military events. I know we're on the 100th anniversary and that has something to do with it, but it doesn't have everything to do with it. What's going on?
I don't know. It is, I'm sorry, that's not a very good answer, but it is a mystery to me why the public imagination and interest, including myself, of course, will pick on a particular battle rather than another one. It's the same thing with the Australians with Gallipoli. The Australian troops fought all the way through the First World War. Why aren't they celebrating? They're celebrating a big defeat or commemorating a big defeat. Why aren't they remembering the taking of Damascus, for example, or the taking of Jerusalem? And it's, so we've somehow fixed on Vimy. But I think these things fluctuate. I mean, I think it's partly that there has been a very determined effort by, for example, the Vimy Foundation to bring it to our attention. Certainly politically, it's been seen as an important occasion. I think also there's a physical spot. I mean, I think the physical place and the monument have helped to fix it into our imaginations. But it does come and go, this remembering, because when I was young, I mean, a long time ago in the 50s at school in Ontario, we didn't learn about Vimy. It was not something that was a big deal. I mean, I didn't really remember hearing much about it when I was at university in the 60s. And so I do think these things, I think, are slightly unpredictable.
It was big, and then it receded from our sort of collective consciousness, and now it's back in a major way. I want to read this, if I can. I'll get you to comment on this, because here's Brigadier General Alexander Ross, who commanded a battalion at Vimy, and this is in 1967, so it's the 50th anniversary, and he described the assault this way. He said, "It was Canada. From the Atlantic to the Pacific on parade, I thought then that in those few minutes I witnessed the birth of a nation." There's that myth-making thing again, that so many prime ministers, and if you go back to this past weekend's events, I mean, Justin Trudeau referred to it, David Johnston, the Governor General, referred to it. Did conquering that ridge make us a nation in a way we weren't before?
No.
Big point of disagreement, needless to say, but fire away. What do you say?
I think in the 1920s and 1930s, the people who had actually fought at Vimy and in the Great War had a completely different sense of the war and of Vimy. I think they thought of it as a Holocaust, a word they used repeatedly, and I think they would respond to today's glorification of Vimy and the war as putting a happy face on a Holocaust. I think they would be horrified and dumbfounded at this elevation of a relatively inconclusive battle, after which the Germans struck a medal to congratulate their soldiers for basically holding the Western Front. I think they would be horrified at the elevation of this battle into an instance of glorifying war itself. I think it's a moral and empirical error to do this.
Let me put this in a context I lived, and I have no great objections to your description of it, Professor. I was lucky enough to serve in the Black Watch in Montreal, a Montreal regiment that sent 12,000 young men to war, and over 2,000 didn't come back. However, amongst those who came back were very many great men, veterans, who stayed in touch with the regiment. And as a young man in the 1960s, doing my best to fit into that very spooky organization, I talked to them. I talked to many score of these young men who were, this was the 60s. They were still in good health, and they still had memories. Taking the memories of battles out of them and trying to talk to them about the battles, that was the kind of reaction I received. They would talk about their leave. They would talk about the friends they had made. And they talk about their memories. And these questions were precious to me because I was a young soldier trying to fit in. And I remember asking this to many of them, what is the big battle? What is that big memory that you brought back from 4 years of that terrible war? There were three answers. It fell into one of the three. The first of the great memories was Passchendaele. The trauma of Passchendaele marked them all. Then it was the 100 days when the boys, looking at me, bragged, we started to break the German army. And the third was the gas attack in Saint-Julien. And when I mentioned Vimy, there was, yes, we were there. So in terms of significance in their memories, Vimy was one of the many battles they fought in. The importance that's given Vimy is certainly after the fact, and it starts, as you just pointed out, in 1967 with the CBC series on the 50th anniversary of Vimy, where these common memories shared by the men who fought the battle were brought onto onto radio, and it was the glorification. It was the moment of nationhood. I think these are constructions and a mythology, and I don't think they're particularly useful to a study of history.
Okay, Tim.
Right, I've been sitting here quietly.
But not happily.
No, not happily, not really. I mean, I've written a whole book on this, the evolution of the idea, and here I think Ian and Jamie and I disagree. We've looked at the evidence, we've looked at a lot of evidence, and I think we come to different conclusions. And mine is that Vimy, of course, is more than a battle. So when we talk about Vimy, we're not just talking about the battle itself. As Margaret has said, it is the monument and the battle. And the monument is to all of Canada's dead. And we saw that on the weekend. This was not a childish event that was unfolding on the 9th. This was a solemn event. The speeches were suitably grave, I think. They spoke to the sacrifice, they spoke to the loss, they spoke, again, to never again. And I think it would be wrong to characterize that all the veterans in the 20s and 30s were for peace. Many of them believed they had done the right thing. They believed in the justness of the war. There were certainly thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands who thought that they had wasted their lives and seen their comrades killed, but certainly not all. There's a very strong group who band together in the Legion and veterans groups who want to remember the war, the camaraderie of the war, and Vimy quite simply matters.
When we went through the model of the traditional bus service, we got complaints back from the 80% of the geography that wasn't getting the service saying, hey, what about us? We're having to pay into this service because bus services, as you know, are heavily subsidized by the taxpayers. We're having to pay into a service that is not available to us. So that's when we went back to the drawing board. We hired we got our own staff and a group of community residents that we put on a transit committee. And we put out requests for proposals for something a little different. And we got a handful back in. And the one that we chose and that we're very excited about is the public transit system, on-demand transit system, in partnership with Uber.
On demand, meaning, and let's just do, sure, let's put this up now, Sheldon, because we have, we've got a few options here of how this would work. For example, no bus, call the Uber car, as for those who use the service understand how it works, and for $3, you could go to the Innisfil Recreation Complex or the Town Hall area. For $4, you can get to a GO bus stop along Yonge Street, or for $5, you can go to the Innisfil Heights employment area, the Highway 400 carpool lot, or the Barrie South GO train station. Obviously, some of those linking up with other public transit options, which then get you further afield. So that's essentially how that will work. Now, $600,000 for the bus service compared to what will the town spend to put this Uber deal in place?
So what council has committed at this point for stage one of this agreement is $100,000. Stage two, we're going to commit another $125,000.
So a lot cheaper.
Much cheaper.
And goes to 100% of the town instead of 20%.
Anybody in the town can use this service.
One last question before we get everybody else involved here. How are the local taxi services in Innisfil reacting to this development?
Well, I'd be lying if I said they were thrilled about it. They're not. We are in consultation with them. We are hoping that we are going to work out a deal with them where they could get involved with us in the future on this initiative. And certainly we're required by law to have accessible transit, so we will be using our taxi services for that part of the service.
And to the best of your knowledge, is this the first time any of Ontario's 444 municipalities have struck this kind of deal?
I think it is, Steve. I think there has been what they call the last mile, so that there's been issues where they've gone to a more traditional transit service. But as far as a standalone transit service, I believe we are first.
Okay, let's get some feedback. Marcy, you've heard the plan. Initial thoughts?
Well, I think from a short-term quick fix perspective, where there's this growing demand, for different mobility choices by the community. You know, maybe this is subsidizing Uber rides in the short term. Maybe you know, a good decision is in the short term. But I think it depends on sort of what that partnership looks like. What you're getting out of that partnership in the long term. I think it's who you're actually serving and who the service is meant to serve, essentially. But from a planning perspective, I think there's a growing concern that more and more governments are considering these ride-sharing services as a substitute for some kind of public transportation planning.
Why is that problematic for you?
As opposed to a mix, which Lynn suggested. So it's often seen as kind of serving the first and last mile problem. I think in a growing community, you have to think about long-term whether this particular service, which is a private service essentially, serving a public need, whether it's really serving, you know, that segment of the population that really needs the service.
Sunil, your initial reactions?
I think it's great, quite honestly. We often criticize governments for not trying something new, for sticking to the tried and true. But in today's day and age, many governments are facing a fiscal crunch. They're facing a citizenry which is expecting more services, better services, on-demand services. And given the context that the Deputy Mayor has outlined, I think that this type of service actually is going to serve more citizens more effectively and at a better price than any of the alternatives that are on the table for them. So I think we should really commend the Deputy Mayor and the town for looking at this. Maybe it won't be a long-term sustainable solution, but I absolutely think it's worth a try to see how it goes and to see whether the citizens of Innisfil find this to be a useful service.
Tom, your view?
I'm less optimistic. So I think for Uber in particular, who are casting about for as many ways to make money as possible, this is, for them, I think, a step in the door. They would love to be part of the transit infrastructure of North America. But I think what they've shown over the last few years is that they're not a good partner for that kind of business.
Why not?
Well, because in essence, I think what you end up doing here is, in a sense, offshoring our own lives. So just as if you offshore manufacturing of something, you may get it cheaper, but then there's prices to be paid for that. You know, are the same kind of environmental standards followed, that labor standards, those kind of things.
You quote an urban planner who says the suburbs are no place to grow old.
Yes.
Why not?
Well, I think for the last 50 or 60 years, we've been building suburbs that are car dependent, where you need a car to get to everything. You have to drive to work, you drive to school, drive to get your shopping. And as people age and perhaps lose their mobility, then it becomes a real problem.
That's a huge thing, isn't it? The loss of independence because you might lose your driver's license because you might be too old or whatever.
Or maybe you can't afford it.
Or you can't afford it. Yeah. Good point. We're going to bring up a few pictures here, and then I'll get you to sort of describe, for example, you know these things. What's wrong with this picture?
Well, I don't see a sidewalk. That's going to make it really difficult for somebody to make their way to shopping or to or to the bus, if there is a bus, if they can reach the bus.
So, and this is really a very typical image of much of suburban Ontario, yes?
Yeah, this could be anywhere.
Well, now, why would they have built these things with no sidewalks?
Well, one possibility is that the development charges that pay for all of the infrastructure, you can pay for the sidewalks there, but then the municipality has to maintain them. So if there are no sidewalks, then that reduces their liability.
It really does scream, we're all about the car here, doesn't it?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, let's put up this next image, which is something you would like to see more of. This is Port Credit Square, Mississauga. What do you like about what you see here?
Well, what I like about Port Credit Village, and Frank's going to be talking more about this, is that it is what I would say building age-friendly from the ground up. It has lots of amenities. You can walk to the GO station. There's a choice of housing. People can relocate into the village from the surrounding single-family dwellings. And there's a choice of housing from townhouses to mid-rise condos and eventually retirement residences. And Frank tells me that some people have actually made that transition 3 times.
In the same place?
Over a 15-year period.
You want to chime in on that, Frank?
Absolutely. We've seen it, quite a few people that have gone from buying a townhouse from us to buying a condominium in a building to moving into our retirement home, all within the same community.
Depending on their stage of life.
Depending on the stage of life, depending on mobility, depending on whether one of them is still around or not, if it's a couple. There are decisions that are made that move them from one place to another, and it's been good because most of those people also came from as Glenn said, came from the surrounding community. A lot of our buyers, probably 80% of our buyers, were within a 5-kilometer radius.
Let me get Samir Sinha on the next part, because the cost of treating people in hospitals as they age obviously gets prohibitive at a certain point. Obviously, the government has sort of adopted, with I think a lot of consultation with you, a let's keep people in their homes as long as possible type of strategy. How does this have implications for where and how people live going forward?
Well, one of the challenges, as you said, when you ask where people aspire to end up, right? People say, I don't want to end up in a nursing home if I can. I'd like to age in my own home. I want to age in my own community, right? But the challenge is if you have mobility concerns, if you have things, say you're an older person who's been hospitalized or a younger person who's had an issue, and then returning to that community with the pictures that we just saw mean that your mobility is going to be significantly compromised. Maybe that no longer becomes an option. And if you don't live in an age-friendly community with options that Frank was just talking about, all of a sudden going back to your own communities, and you might have to actually live in hospital. So why not only just think about a healthcare system that's more responsive with more home care and other options, but actually start at the level of where we live and make sure we design it properly so you can age truly in place.
In which case, I go to the planner next. How much is all of this on your radar screen in Burlington, Ontario?
It's all on our radar screen. We've just released a new official plan that's going to take us for the next 25 years. We call it Build Up, Build Smart, and Build Beautiful. And this is all about the building smart, making sure that the city is walkable, the neighborhoods are walkable. We're going to build 3 new neighborhoods around our GO station. They're all going to be built on what we call a traditional grid street pattern, which is straight grids, 90-degree angles at the street. There's a theory about all of us as humans that if you can see where you're going when you walk, you will go there. And if it is confusing to your eye, your brain is going to say it's not safe and you're not going to do it. It's a very simple concept, but we need to translate that into how we build neighborhoods and build a multiplicity of housing types. So what Frank talked about and Samir talked about, people have choice in the community. That people do want to stay in their communities. They do want to age in their communities. They want to walk in their communities, and we want to make them accessible for them.
In your report, Glenn, I think you've got 500 smaller communities and towns and larger cities, all of whom have declared their intent to become kind of more age-friendly.
That's right.
That sounds like an enormous undertaking, though. How's that going to happen?
Well, the age-friendly community concept was introduced by the World Health Organization 10 years ago. So it's only 10 years old. So it's actually had quite a rapid take-up. But right now, the focus is on engaging with older adults and having a conversation about what the priorities are. And the point I'm trying to make in the report is that these conversations are being held outside of the mainstream of the bureaucracy of how cities are built and operated.
So we need to get those conversations happening where?
That's right. Well, one place is right in the planning department. If you have an official plan and you have a council that has said, yes, we want to be age-friendly, to me, it makes a great deal of sense to actually acknowledge that in the plan.
The problem itself was something I'd been thinking about for at least 30 years, since I entered professional life, since the first time someone said to me, oh, you're an expert on your subject? Well, let me explain your subject to you. And it had kind of rattled around in my head for some time, but what really gave it some definition was maybe over the past 10 years, and particularly with the emergence of a lot of very complicated international issues where people, instead of questioning experts, were replacing experts. They weren't just questioning their doctors about vaccines, they were replacing their doctors about vaccines.
Because they know better.
Because they know better.
Because they read it on the web.
Exactly.
Yeah. Isn't it, however, let's, for argument's sake, take the other side. It is a good thing to have a healthy skepticism about the so-called expertise we hear, is it not?
Absolutely, and I would argue in the American context, one of the things that is part of the American character is this kind of reliance on the common sense of the average person. Americans really still have that frontier mentality that you don't really need anybody to explain things to you when you build your own house and farm your own land.
But there is something to that, isn't there, Tom? There's something to
There's
that.
something to it, without doubt. And I want people, I would never tell anybody, simply accept what an expert says, a doctor, a lawyer. That's why you get second opinions. That's why you have professional boards that keep tabs on members of a expert community. What's different now is that people say, if I don't like what my doctor said, if I don't like what some expert said, if I don't like what my lawyer or a journalist told me, then I simply dismiss them as irrelevant because I know better, because I'm smarter than they are.
This is not a new topic in as much, well, here in the province of Ontario, we had a government get elected, what is it now, 1995, so, 22 years ago, on the theme of it's time for a common sense revolution. And they won a majority on that. We also have political scientist Richard Hofstadter publishing a book called Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. That came out in 1964. So this is not new.
It's not
right?
new. And the concern about experts taking over our lives is not new, especially as the world became complex. Hofstadter makes a great point in almost 60 years ago, where he says, because modern life is so complex, people do have to rely on experts, and they resent that. What's different now, and the word I use in the book, is this narcissism that says, I don't just question experts, I am better than the experts, I am smarter than the experts. And that's where I think people get into some serious trouble.
Is it a uniquely American phenomenon?
I don't think so. I think the book's going to appear in Korea and China. It's had a terrific reception here in Canada, as well as in Europe, where it's been covered in places like Italy and Germany and the UK. I think it's a problem of the developed world, which is bound together by certain common things like mass education, the presence of the internet, the presence of a lot of free press outlets where people can kind of pick and choose and live in their own echo chambers. So I think it's something that's most pronounced in the United States because of some peculiarities of the American character, but I don't think it's at all limited to the United States.
Well, here's the quote. Conspiracy theories are deeply attractive to people who have a hard time making sense of a complicated world. Tom, the world's only going to get more complicated, which means this phenomenon presumably is only going to get worse. What do we do about this?
Well, the optimistic view is that we assume this is some kind of phase we're going through, and that it'll pass. It seems, for example, in Europe, seems to be kind of passing. There seems to be a rethinking of this. The events in France and the Netherlands, in particular, seem to be moving away from that. My concern is that this changes in the wake of some kind of a disaster. We talked about vaccines. Nothing will end the anti-vaccine nonsense quicker than a pandemic.
Right.
Right now,
then you get your kid
signed
up.
I took the polio vaccine because I knew people that had polio. But I think a war, a depression, historically, these have been the moments where people kind of come to their senses and say, well, maybe we ought to talk to people who actually know how to do things before we go down this road again. I don't want that to happen. And I wrote the book partly to spur this discussion before that happens.
But you leave it in the end. I don't want to give away the ending too much, I guess, but the fact is, you're a pessimist on this.
I am. I've tried to be optimistic, and I keep failing. I want to be more optimistic, and I believe in the resilience of democratic institutions. If there is one case for optimism, it's that democratic institutions, whether in the United States, Canada, or anywhere else, have an amazing ability to correct themselves and to heal. And I'm hoping that this is just one of many phases that the world has gone through of this kind of know-nothingism.
Well, let me pull another fact out of the book that, again, is somewhat disquieting. Nearly 30% of Americans think, quote, a secretive elite with a globalist agenda is conspiring to eventually rule the world. There will be no disabusing people of that notion, regardless of how many facts you bring to bear to suggest it's not true. So where does that leave us?
Well, partly it leaves us with generational change. I think a lot of the folks who believe that are already middle-aged and older. I have a lot of faith in a younger generation, although I'm known for, certainly in my social media presence, I tease millennials quite often, but I actually have a great deal of faith in them and the generations to come. I also think that some of this is not so much belief as it is a protest. When people say, well, I think there's a globalist elite, what they really mean is, I'm unemployed, I'm upset, I want to express that anger in some way. I don't really believe these things, but I want to show somebody who's talking to me that I'm this angry. And I hope that that will pass as well, because I still believe that most people do have a strong reservoir of common sense that will overcome this.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, April 14th, 2017. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety at tvo.org, our website, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and now, thanks to our nightly Twitter live stream, on our Periscope page. That's periscope.tv/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit tvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.